The streets of Stonebridge, Georgia shimmered with Christmas lights, casting golden halos over cobblestone sidewalks and grand colonial homes. Darius Johnson, a 44-year-old real estate mogul known for turning rundown properties into dream homes, stepped out of his black Range Rover onto his manicured driveway. His custom wreath sparkled on the front door. Inside, jazz hummed low from hidden speakers. Everything in his world, at least on the surface, seemed polished, successful, and secure. But Darius had a secret. A living, breathing, seductive secret named Tasha Green. She had blown into his life like a summer hurricane in September. They met at a fundraising gala. He was one of the event's main sponsors. She was a stunning mystery in a crimson dress, volunteering at the silent auction table. She laughed easily, asked intelligent questions, and listened with the kind of attentiveness most women had long since stopped giving him. By the end of the night, he had her number. By the end of the week, she had keys to his condo. "I know I move fast," Darius admitted to his best friend Marcus one morning at their favorite cigar lounge. "But man, she's different. She makes me feel young again. Like I've got another shot." Marcus raised a brow. "You're not 25, D. You're one divorce, one tax bracket, and one bad woman away from losing it all." Darius waved him off with a chuckle. "She's not like that." But even then, something in his voice cracked. Not quite conviction, not quite doubt. Tasha was 27, beautiful beyond reason, with caramel skin, sleek wigs that changed weekly, and a closet that could make a boutique jealous. She claimed she was a freelance marketing consultant, but never seemed to have any meetings or deadlines. Instead, she had spa appointments, bottomless mimosa brunches, and a relentless craving for retail therapy. At first, Darius indulged her. What was the point of success if you couldn't share it? Still, the sheen wore thin fast. She'd order 10 items online and return none. She'd throw dinner parties and stick him with the cleanup, or worse, the guest list. When she started asking for access to his banking app for emergencies, he laughed it off, until the emergencies became daily. One night, after she fell asleep curled against him in bed, Darius opened his Amex statement on his phone. $6,700 at Louis Vuitton. $3,200 at a wellness retreat he never approved. Another $800 charged to his Tesla for what turned out to be her best friend's joyride. He stared at the numbers and felt a slow, cold crawl in his chest. Not fear, not even anger. It was the dull ache of recognition. He'd seen this before, in his early years, in deals gone wrong, in women who saw his worth not in who he was, but in what he had. The next morning, over eggs and coffee, he confronted her. "Tasha, we need to talk about these charges." She blinked, then gave a soft smile. "You don't trust me?" "That's not the point," he said. "We've been dating 3 months. You're spending like we've been married for 3 years. She reached across the table and touched his hand. "You never said no to me before. Is this really about money, or are you scared of being happy?" That night, Darius sat alone in his home office. Outside, the Christmas lights twinkled. Inside, his instinct screamed. He opened his journal, a habit he kept since childhood, and scribbled. "Plan to end it after Christmas. She won't like it, but I can't keep living like this. This is not love. This is survival." What Darius didn't know, what he couldn't have possibly known, was that Tasha had her own plan, and hers didn't end in a breakup. It ended in blood. Christmas was less than 2 weeks away, and Darius Johnson felt more alone than he had in years. His house glowed with garlands and golden lights. There was a 12-foot fir tree in the living room decorated with hand-blown ornaments, a fireplace burning low, and a custom wreath on every window. But the warmth was all cosmetic. The cheer was shallow. And in the middle of it all was Tasha Green, dancing through the days like a queen in her castle, oblivious or indifferent to the storm she had become. Darius had stopped pretending. The feelings that once intoxicated him, her beauty, her energy, her laugh, now felt like static in his ears. Every conversation left him exhausted. Every gesture of hers felt performative, like a rehearsed act in a long con. It was around this time he noticed things going missing. One morning, he reached into his study drawer and realized one of his checkbooks was gone. When he asked her, she laughed and said, Baby, you probably moved it when you were reorganizing. He hadn't reorganized anything. Another time, he spotted her sitting in his office, using his laptop. She closed the browser too quickly when he walked in. Just ordering a coat, she chirped. But something in her tone felt too sweet, too slick. The final straw came on a Tuesday evening, when he walked into the bedroom and saw a shopping bag on the bed. Inside was a limited edition Rolex. Price tag, $19,000. Tasha, he said slowly, where did this come from? She turned, wrapped in a silk robe, sipping red wine. It's for you, she said, her voice dripping like honey. For Christmas. I wanted to surprise you. With my own credit card? He asked flatly. She stared at him for a beat, then shrugged. What's yours is mine, right? Darius laughed, cold, sharp, humorless. No, sweetheart. That's not how this works. Her face darkened, lips tightening. So now I'm a gold digger? I didn't say that, he replied, stepping away. But I think we need some space after the holidays. Some real conversations about what this relationship is and isn't. She didn't respond. She just looked at him. And in that silence, something shifted in her expression, just for a second. A flicker of something cold, calculating. Something dangerous. That night, while Darius lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above him, Tasha was downstairs on the phone. He didn't hear her exact words, but he caught the low tones, the nervous pacing, the clink of a wine glass being set down hard. What he couldn't see was her clutching the phone tightly, whispering, he's pulling away. He's getting suspicious. On the other end, a man's voice replied, then we handle it. You know what we talked about? Yeah, she murmured, but I didn't think it'd be this soon. You want that money, don't you? The man asked. You want the house? The life? Then stick to the plan. He goes down before Christmas. Meanwhile, Darius met up with Marcus the next day at a coffee shop downtown. He looked tired, older somehow. I think she's got someone else, he said after a long sip of black coffee. Or something going on I can't see. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms folded. You saying she's cheating or stealing? Maybe both, Darius replied, voice low. But either way, I'm done. You gotta be careful, D, Marcus warned. You're dealing with a woman who doesn't take no for an answer. Darius nodded slowly. That's what I'm afraid of. That weekend, Tasha seemed unusually sweet. She made him breakfast in bed, played old jazz records he liked, even suggested they visit a cabin in the mountains for New Year's. But beneath this sudden affection, Darius saw the cracks. When she wasn't looking, he checked his bank account. 2 transfers had been made to a mystery account. One for $3,000, the other for $12,000. He printed the statement and locked it in his safe. That night, in his journal, he wrote, She's planning something. I need to protect myself. Cameras, locks, witnesses. Whatever this is, it's not love, it's war. The next morning, while Tasha showered, Darius installed a hidden security camera in his living room, just in case. He didn't know exactly what he was preparing for, but his gut told him it was coming. And fast. By the end of that day, he'd arranged for his assistant to change the passwords to his financial accounts. He scheduled a meeting with his lawyer for the following Monday. He had no idea he wouldn't make it to that meeting, because Tasha had already moved the gun from the upstairs drawer to her handbag, and she was waiting for the right moment. The moment where she could play the grieving girlfriend and make it all look like an accident. The morning of December 22nd began like any other in the Johnson household, but it would end in blood. At 6:32 a.m., Marilyn Thomas, Darius's longtime housekeeper, pulled into the driveway like she did every Tuesday and Friday for the last 4 years. The frost on her windshield still clung to the corners as she stepped out, tugging her scarf tighter around her neck. She unlocked the side door with her usual key, slipped off her boots in the mudroom, and called out softly, "Morning, Mr. Johnson." Miss Green. Silence. She didn't think much of it. Maybe they were sleeping in. The holiday season had that effect on folks. But something was off. The house felt still, not peaceful, stifled, tense, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Marilyn walked through the kitchen, setting her bag down. She grabbed a rag and started wiping down the granite counters, her routine muscle memory. But as she rounded the corner to the living room, her heart nearly stopped. There, lying awkwardly on the Persian rug near the fireplace, was Darius. He was on his side, one leg slightly bent, eyes half-lidded. His once-polished pajamas were soaked in blood around the collar. A handgun lay a few feet away, and next to it, Tasha. She was seated on a couch, barefoot, face blotchy and wet. Her arms were wrapped around herself as she rocked slowly back and forth, muttering something inaudible. Marilyn froze, then gasped, then screamed, "Oh Lord! Oh Jesus, no!" She rushed to Darius, falling to her knees. His skin was pale, lips tinged blue, but, miraculously, his chest moved. Shallow, barely, but breathing. "Tasha," she shouted. "What happened?" Tasha didn't answer. Marilyn yanked her phone from her pocket and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "It's Darius Johnson," she said, sobbing. "He's been shot. I think he's still alive. Please, hurry." When first responders arrived minutes later, they found the scene just as Marilyn had described, except for one key detail. Tasha had composed herself. Her tears had stopped. Her voice was clear. She met the officers at the door like a hostess greeting unexpected guests. "He shot himself," she said simply. "He was upset. He said he felt like everything was falling apart. I tried to stop him. I really did." Detective Naomi Brooks was called in within the hour. It wasn't the type of case she usually worked 2 days before Christmas, but something about the initial report caught her attention. High-profile businessman. Girlfriend's story felt too neat. She walked through the Johnson home with gloves on, eyes scanning everything. The living room told a different story than Tasha's version. There was no sign of a struggle. The gun was positioned too far from Darius's body for it to have fallen from his hand. More importantly, there was no visible gunpowder on his fingers. His hands were too clean for someone who'd supposedly pulled the trigger at point-blank range. And then there was the angle of the entry wound, behind the right ear, execution style, not typical of suicide attempts. Naomi crouched beside the fireplace, eyeing the smear of blood near the edge of the rug. He was seated, she murmured, more to herself than anyone. Calm. He didn't see it coming. At the hospital, Darius was rushed into emergency surgery. The bullet had fractured his skull and lodged near his brainstem. The doctors weren't hopeful. "He's a strong man," one surgeon told Naomi in the waiting area, "but it's a miracle he made it to the hospital alive. Even if he survives, we don't know what kind of damage we're looking at." Back at the precinct, Naomi sat across from Tasha in the interview room. The walls buzzed with quiet tension. Tasha was polished, rehearsed. She'd dab her eyes occasionally, sniffled at the right moments. "He was so sad lately," she said. "He felt used by everyone. He told me he was thinking about ending it. I should have taken the gun from him. I should have done more." Naomi leaned forward. "Did he leave a note?" Tasha blinked. "No, I didn't see one. And you said he shot himself?" "Yes. I heard the bang. I ran in and saw him on the ground. The gun was still in his hand." Naomi scribbled something in her notepad, then looked up. "There's just one problem with that," she said, her voice flat. "We didn't find any prints on the gun. Not his. Not yours. It was wiped clean." Tasha's eyes widened. "Just for a beat." I didn't touch it," she stammered. Naomi nodded slowly. "Right." She stood up. "Thanks for your time, Miss Green. We'll be in touch." Over the next 48 hours, Naomi ordered a forensic sweep of the entire home. She got a warrant to pull Tasha's phone records and her financials. And that's when things started to unravel. 2 transfers, both wired to an account under the name Malik Rivers, a name that hadn't appeared in any of Tasha's statements. Yet, a call came in from the hospital late that night. "Detective Brooks?" the nurse said. Darius just squeezed my hand. Naomi sat up straight. "He's awake. Not fully. But there's something in his eyes. He's coming back." And just like that, Naomi knew this wasn't a case of a broken man and a tragic accident. This was a hit gone wrong, a setup that didn't stick, and Tasha Green, with her crocodile tears and designer bags, was about to have a very different kind of Christmas. Behind bars, Detective Naomi Brooks had seen her fair share of liars. She'd sat across from tearful wives, smooth-talking husbands, grieving children, many of them spinning half-truths so tightly they almost believed them. But there was something about Tasha Green that crawled under Naomi's skin. It wasn't just the forced sorrow or the inconsistent timeline. It was how calm she remained, how comfortable she looked in that interrogation room, like she'd done this before. Naomi was determined to find out if she had. Back at the precinct, Naomi sat at her desk, a half-empty coffee mug to her left and 3 monitors glowing in front of her. She began with Tasha's background. Birth name, Letitia Monique Harris. Current ID, Tasha Green. Aliases used in the past 10 years. Nia Thompson, Shayla Bryant. Residences, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, and now Georgia. Each state came with a trail. Restraining orders, credit fraud charges that were mysteriously dropped, and 2 former boyfriends who had filed complaints of financial exploitation, though neither case stuck. The pattern was clear. Tasha latched onto wealthy men, embedded herself in their lives, then left chaos in her wake. And in all that paperwork, one name kept popping up, a man listed as a former roommate, sometimes as an emergency contact. Malik Rivers. Naomi narrowed her eyes at the screen. Malik wasn't just some footnote. He'd been living with Tasha under different names in at least 2 cities. In one affidavit, a man claimed Malik threatened him after a breakup with Tasha. In another report, Malik was caught using a debit card that didn't belong to him. One linked to a wealthy nightclub owner who died under undetermined circumstances. None of it had stuck, but now it painted a picture. Naomi picked up her phone. "Give me surveillance from Tasha Green's neighborhood in the last 3 weeks," she told the tech team. "I want to know who's been coming and going, and run a full trace on any calls between her and Malik Rivers in the past 90 days. Meanwhile, at Stonebridge Regional Hospital, Darius Johnson stirred again. This time, his eyes didn't just flutter. They locked onto the face of the nurse hovering above him. "Mr. Johnson?" she whispered. He blinked slowly, his lips dry, but the strength in his stare returned. It wasn't long before Naomi arrived. She stood at the foot of his hospital bed, watching him silently for a moment. "You're lucky to be alive," she said. Darius shifted, pain flickering across his face. "Tasha," he murmured. It was her. Naomi stepped closer. "You're sure?" He nodded. She pulled the trigger. I was sitting down. She came behind me. I didn't even see the gun. Naomi's jaw clenched. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was attempted murder. By the next morning, Naomi had what she needed. Security footage showed Malik Rivers meeting Tasha in the parking lot of a gas station on the outskirts of town, 2 nights before the shooting. The footage showed them embracing, talking for over 10 minutes. Tasha handed him an envelope. Phone records confirmed 5 calls between them in the past week, all late at night. And the final nail? A flag bank transfer from Darius's private account, $12,000 wired to an account in Malik's name. Naomi returned to her captain's office with a folder in hand. She didn't act alone, she said firmly. This was premeditated. They planned to take his money, leave him dead, and walk away clean. The captain nodded slowly. You think she was going to stage it as suicide? Naomi's eyes were cold. I think she thought he wouldn't live long enough to say otherwise. Across town, Tasha sat in the comfort of Darius's home, lighting candles as if she were still playing house. She paced the kitchen, phone pressed her ear. I don't know what she knows, she hissed to Malik. But the detective's sniffing around. You better stay low. On the other end, Malik's voice was sharp. Then handle it. Like we planned. Tasha exhaled. I'll figure it out. I always do. But she didn't know that outside the house, an unmarked cruiser had just pulled up, and Naomi Brooks was walking up the steps with an arrest warrant in her hand. The human brain is a mysterious thing. One day it's buried in fog, numb, broken, unsure which way is up. And then, like a switch flipping in the dark, a single image or sound sparks a chain reaction that brings everything rushing back. For Darius Johnson, that moment came on a quiet Thursday morning as winter rain tapped against the hospital window. He was alone, the television muted, his tray of untouched food cooling on the bedside table. Then came a sound, a ringtone, not his own, but one he recognized. From a hallway, a nurse's phone played a song that once made him smile, Between the Sheets by the Isley Brothers. Tasha used to hum it. She called it their song. But this time, it hit different. The melody didn't bring warmth, it brought ice. A memory crashed in. He saw himself seated on the velvet armchair in his living room. The fire crackled. His back was to her. He heard her whispering on the phone. She was nervous. Then a sharp click. He turned. And then, bang. His eyes flew open, heart hammering. His pulse monitor spiked. A nurse rushed in, panicked, but Darius grabbed her wrist. It was her, he rasped, voice hoarse from days of disuse. Tasha, she shot me. Detective Naomi Brooks was at her desk when the call came in. She stood abruptly, grabbed her coat, and headed for Stonebridge Regional. By the time she arrived, Darius was sitting upright, alert but still visibly weak. A white bandage wrapped around his head like a war survivor. His voice was steadier now. I remember everything, he told Naomi. She was behind me. I was just telling her I didn't think this was working anymore. I wasn't angry. I was calm. She walked behind the chair, and I heard her whisper, I'm sorry. Then she pulled the trigger. Naomi nodded solemnly, her pen not moving. She didn't need to write this down. This wasn't a hunch anymore. This was truth. Did you ever see the gun before? She asked. No. I kept mine locked upstairs, he said. But this wasn't mine. The grip was smaller. She must have brought it. Naomi stood. Thank you, Darius. You just gave me what I needed. Back at the precinct, the walls of Naomi's case room were now filled with photos. Tasha, Malik, bank records, phone logs, surveillance stills. Red string stretched between thumbtacks like a spider's web. But now the spider was exposed. The warrant came down fast. Tasha Green was arrested at a nail salon 2 blocks from Darius's house. She wore oversized sunglasses, a plush pink sweatsuit, and carried a designer purse. As officers cuffed her, she tried to keep her voice sweet. Is this a mistake? She asked. I haven't done anything. Naomi stepped forward, showing her badge. Darius remembers. Tasha, you shot him. You wired his money to Malik. And we have the footage. The calls. The texts. You didn't just fail to kill him. You left a trail of glitter behind you. Tasha's jaw tensed. The softness faded. Her true face, cold, cunning, venomous, slipped out for just a second. You're making a mistake, she hissed. Naomi leaned in. No, honey, you did. While Tasha sat in holding, Naomi turned her sights on Malik Rivers. He was slippery, living under an alias in a rental property outside of Atlanta. When police knocked on his door, he tried to run out the back, only to be tackled by a deputy in the garden. Inside his house, a burner phone with recent calls to Tasha, a duffel bag with $5,000 cash, and a torn-up piece of a handwritten note. Once it's done, meet me at the cabin. Don't forget the keys. Back in interrogation, Malik folded faster than expected. Faced with a mountain of evidence and a potential 25-year sentence, he cut a deal. She came to me with the idea, he said. Said he had money, assets, life insurance. We'd be set if he was gone. I didn't pull the trigger, man. I didn't even want her to do it that soon. Naomi didn't flinch. You knew she planned to kill him. He nodded. Yeah, I did. Meanwhile, word of Darius's survival spread like wildfire. Friends, colleagues, and community leaders rallied behind him. Local news hailed it as a holiday miracle. But behind the praise, Darius stayed quiet, recovering in solitude, watching the world move while he pieced together the shattered parts of his life. When Naomi visited him one last time before trial, she handed him a small folder. Inside were photos, evidence of how close he'd come to losing everything. Darius looked up at her. Thank you, he said, voice low, for believing me, even when I couldn't speak. Naomi gave a small smile. You were never the one who needed to talk. She was, and she talked too much. They shook hands. As Naomi walked away, Darius leaned back in his bed, closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, breathed without fear. The worst had passed, but the reckoning was just beginning. Jail didn't rattle Tasha Green. Not at first. In her mind, it was temporary, a glitch in the plan. She'd been in tight spots before. She knew how to manipulate, how to charm. She'd even studied how to cry convincingly in court. So when the cell door clanged shut behind her in Fulton County Jail, she barely blinked. But what Tasha didn't expect was how quickly the walls would close in. Not just physically, but strategically. The DA's office was building an airtight case. Darius was recovering faster than anyone predicted. Malik had flipped. The press had turned her name into poison. And inside the jail, Tasha's reputation as a socialite turned attempted killer spread like wildfire. She didn't care, because she had a plan. Her bunkmate was Veronica Sims, a sharp-tongued woman in her early 40s who'd been inside long enough to know who to trust and who not to. Tasha clocked her within the first hour. "You're quiet," Tasha said casually one evening, painting her nails with a toothbrush dipped in Kool-Aid. "Smart. You've been around. You ever handle favors for people?" Veronica gave her a side glance. "Depends on the people. I need someone handled," Tasha whispered, eyes flicking toward the small sliver of moonlight seeping in from the barred window. "Someone outside." Veronica didn't react. "What kind of handle?" Tasha leaned closer, her voice like silk wrapping around a dagger. "A witness. He's talking too much. I need that to stop." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "You serious?" Tasha nodded slowly. "There's $5,000 in it. Maybe more. I got friends. You just make the call." Veronica smiled, and then excused herself to use the phone. But the number she dialed wasn't for a hitman. It was for Detective Naomi Brooks. That evening, Naomi sat across from Veronica in a quiet interrogation room inside the jail, tape recorder on. "She asked me to find someone to hurt him," Veronica said flatly. "Said she'd pay through her friend's Cash App. Even gave me Darius's hospital name." "Did she write anything down?" Naomi asked. Veronica nodded, wrote the initials DJ on a piece of soap wrapper, and drew a little bullseye next to it. Naomi leaned back, jaw tight. "She's not just dangerous. She's reckless." The next morning, Naomi obtained a search warrant for Tasha's jail cell. Inside her belongings, tucked in a sock, they found a torn envelope with notes scribbled in code, including, "Get it done before trial. No witness, no problem." That was all ADA Monique Harris needed to upgrade the charges. Tasha was now facing not only attempted murder and financial fraud, but conspiracy to commit a second violent crime and witness intimidation. Her web of deception, once so carefully spun, was collapsing faster than she could spin another thread. When Tasha was brought into Naomi's interview room again, she was no longer the composed, glamorous woman who once floated through high-end galas. Her hair was frizzed, her eyes ringed in red, her voice shrill with desperation. "You set me up," she spat at Naomi. "That woman, Veronica, she's lying." Naomi folded her arms calmly. "She recorded your conversation." Tasha's mouth fell open, and we found the notes. "The plan? You tried to silence Darius from a jail cell. You just made my job easier." Tasha slammed her palms on the table. "He was gonna ruin me. He was gonna tell the world." Naomi leaned forward. "You did that all by yourself." Meanwhile, Darius watched the news coverage unfold from his rehab center. He saw Tasha's face plastered on every local channel, labeled as Stonebridge's Black Widow. He listened as anchors detailed her failed jailhouse plot. And for the first time since the shooting, he allowed himself to smile. Not out of joy, but because the illusion was gone. The mask had fallen, and the woman who nearly killed him in his own home was finally seen for who she truly was. The courtroom was packed. News vans lined the steps of the Fulton County Courthouse like buzzards circling prey. Reporters whispered outside glass doors, adjusting their microphones, waiting for a glimpse of the woman who had once been introduced as a rising Southern beauty and now wore a prison-issued jumpsuit instead of silk. Tasha Green, or rather, Letitia Monique Harris, was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. She held her chin high, tried to channel the confidence she once used to glide through cocktail parties. But her eyes darted toward the defense table, scanning the faces, searching for familiarity. None came. Her lawyer, Ronald Easton, a private defense attorney hired from her dwindling stash of ill-gotten cash, patted her hand and leaned over. "Smile when the jury walks in. You're the victim, remember?" Tasha gave him a practiced smirk, but it was thin, hollow, and fading by the second. At the prosecution table sat Assistant District Attorney Monique Harris, a firebrand in heels, known across Georgia for being relentless, articulate, and devastating in the courtroom. Today, she was dressed in charcoal gray with a blood-red blouse. Purposefully symbolic. To her left sat Detective Naomi Brooks, notebook open, eyes laser-focused. And beside them, seated quietly, his presence a thunderous shadow, was Darius Johnson. The bullet had taken part of his hearing. He wore a small aid behind his right ear. The scar along his temple was faint, but visible. And when his eyes locked on Tasha's across the room, he didn't blink. She did. The judge, Honorable Sylvia Gaines, took the bench. A stern woman in her 60s, she wasted no time. State of Georgia versus Letitia Harris, a.k.a. Tasha Green, she announced. Charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated assault, theft by deception, and witness intimidation. How does the defendant plead? Ronald Easton stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. Tasha echoed the words softly. The trial had officially begun. ADA Monique Harris rose with calm authority. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began. This case is not about a tragic misunderstanding. It is about greed, manipulation, and premeditated violence. The defendant infiltrated the life of a generous man, deceived him, exploited him financially, and when she feared being exposed, she tried to end his life. She paused, then pointed gently toward Darius. She shot him in the back of the head, in his own home, and thought she could walk away free. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Ronald Easton countered with charm. My client was in love. She was in over her head. Mr. Johnson suffered a terrible accident during a volatile emotional moment. But that is not attempted murder. It is heartbreak. Tasha dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The jury remained unreadable. Marilyn Thomas, Darius's housekeeper, took the stand first. I found him lying there, blood all around. She was just sitting there, not screaming, not helping, just watching. Next came the forensics expert, who detailed the ballistics and lack of gunpowder on Darius's hands, evidence that undermined any suicide theory. Then came the digital trail, bank statements, surveillance photos, and phone logs. Monique brought the jury's attention to one specific image. Tasha handing an envelope to Malik Rivers. She said she was alone in this. But the evidence tells a different story. Under heavy guard, Malik Rivers was brought in wearing a Navy suit. No cuffs. In exchange for immunity, he'd agreed to testify in full. She told me Darius was rich, Malik said. Said if we got rid of him, she'd get the house, the accounts, everything. She promised me we'd run off together. And what did she say about the night of the shooting? Monique asked. She said, it's going to be quick. He'll never see it coming. Tasha shook her head in disbelief, whispering to her lawyer. But the jury had heard it, and they believed it. The room grew silent when Darius Johnson stepped to the witness box. He walked slowly, deliberately. His posture was proud, but his eyes held pain. Monique's voice softened. Mr. Johnson, do you remember what happened that morning? He nodded. I was sitting in the armchair. I told her I wanted space. I wasn't angry. I just knew it had to end. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She walked behind me. He paused, swallowing hard. I heard her whisper something. I think it was I'm sorry. Then, everything went black. Monique let the silence hang. No further questions, Your Honor. Easton approached, attempting to discredit. Mr. Johnson, you suffered a traumatic brain injury. Isn't it possible you're misremembering? Darius leaned in. I may have lost blood. I may have lost hearing. But I didn't lose my instincts. I trusted her, and she tried to kill me. The gallery was silent. Veronica Sims testified next. She asked me to help make the problem disappear, she told the court. She meant him. She was trying to finish the job from behind bars. Monique presented the coded note, the Cash App records, the audio. The jury took notes furiously. Ronald Easton looked like he was aging by the hour. Monique stood before the jury, steady and surgical. She wore designer dresses and smiled at cameras. But behind the sparkle was a predator. She used love as a weapon. And when it stopped working, she reached for a real one. She turned to Darius. He's lucky to be alive. But luck is not justice. You are. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury filed back in. The clerk stood. On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. One by one, the verdicts echoed. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 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 Tasha's face collapsed. Not into tears, but into fury. This is a setup, she screamed. He did this to me. I was the victim. But her voice was drowned by the sound of the judge's gavel. Order in the court. Judge Gaines leaned forward. Letitia Harris, you are sentenced to 65 years in prison. No possibility of parole. May the consequences of your actions remind others that love is not a license to exploit or destroy. As deputies led Tasha away, Darius exhaled. It wasn't victory. It was survival. And finally, it was over. The gavel struck twice, echoing like thunder in the silence that followed. Tasha Green, once the envy of social circles and the center of every room she walked into, now stood trembling in an orange jumpsuit with chains around her wrists. Her manicured nails were chipped, her once flawless hair pulled back into a tight, tired bun. The courtroom stared, some in shock, others in silent relief. Judge Sylvia Gaines looked over her glasses, her voice firm but even. Letitia Monique Harris, also known as Tasha Green, this court has found you guilty of all charges: attempted murder, conspiracy, theft by deception, and witness intimidation. You plotted to end a man's life for greed. You exploited his trust, manipulated his heart, and when that failed, you reached for violence. Tasha's lip trembled, but the tears didn't come this time. The judge continued. You will serve 65 years in the custody of the Georgia Department of Corrections, without eligibility for parole. May this sentence reflect the weight of your betrayal, and may it serve as a warning to those who think love is a tool for destruction. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Some gasped. Others nodded. Tasha, eyes wide, jerked toward her lawyer. This isn't happening. They're setting me up, she hissed. Her voice cracked, no longer sweet or sultry, just broken. I didn't mean to. He was going to leave me. But no one listened. The bailiff stepped forward. Tasha resisted for half a second, then stopped. Her shoulders slumped as she was led from the courtroom, a ghost of the woman she used to be. Darius sat still. He hadn't moved much since the sentence was read. His fingers clenched the edge of the bench, knuckles pale. But when the door slammed behind Tasha, he let out a slow, deep breath, as if he'd been holding it for 3 months. Detective Naomi Brooks walked over and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. You did it, she said softly. Darius shook his head. You did. All of you. No, Naomi said, locking eyes with him. You lived. You remembered. That's what brought her down. Outside, reporters swarmed. But Darius didn't stop to speak. He walked past the cameras, through the wind, and into the cold Georgia air. There was no victory in his face. No triumph. Just peace. And for the first time since the blood soaked his Christmas rug, he felt like a man reclaiming his life. Not from Tasha, but from fear. The scar along Darius Johnson's right temple never fully faded. Some days it itched. Other days it throbbed like a ghost of the moment that nearly ended him. But he never covered it. Never hid it. It was a reminder of what he survived and who he chose to become. 6 months after the trial, the mansion in Stonebridge stood empty. Darius sold it quietly, refusing interviews, declining media offers, turning down lucrative book deals. He didn't want fame. He wanted peace. He moved south to Savannah, bought a modest home on a tree-lined street, and kept his world small. Mornings started with coffee on the porch. Afternoons were spent walking without purpose. Nights were filled with silence, and he welcomed it. But healing, he learned, wasn't just about escape. It was about turning pain into purpose. One spring morning, he received a letter from a domestic abuse shelter in Atlanta. They followed his story and asked if he might be willing to speak at a survivors group. Just a small gathering. Nothing formal. Just real people. Real pain. Darius stared at the letter for hours. Then he picked up the phone and said yes. That night, he stood in a cramped church basement. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Folding chairs formed a loose circle. And seated in them, women and men of all ages, all backgrounds, each carrying invisible scars. He told his story, not about wealth or betrayal or courtrooms, but about trust. How he ignored the red flags. How he doubted his instincts. How love, when mixed with manipulation, can become a slow poison. and how surviving doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're still here. When he finished, no one clapped. They didn't have to. The nods, the tears, the stillness in the room, that was the applause. Word spread. More invitations came in schools, shelters, veterans groups, even prisons. Everywhere he spoke, Darius carried the same message. You're not stupid for loving the wrong person. You're not broken because you were fooled. But you owe it to yourself to heal, and to never hand your soul to someone who sees you as a target instead of a partner. People listened, because Darius didn't preach. He remembered, and that made all the difference. One rainy evening, after finishing a speech at a community center in Macon, a young woman approached him. She was maybe 22, nervous, fidgeting. My ex used to hit me, she whispered. I thought he loved me. But hearing you talk, it makes me think maybe I deserve better. Darius smiled, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You do, he said. We all do. Today, Darius runs a foundation called Silent Strength, offering support to survivors of emotional and physical abuse. He funds legal aid for those trapped in dangerous situations. He trains officers on how to recognize signs of coercive control. And every year, on the anniversary of the shooting, he visits the hospital where his life was saved and delivers gift baskets to the ICU staff. Not because he has to, but because he's alive. And in the quiet hours, when he sits alone beneath Georgia's wide skies, Darius sometimes rereads the last line he ever wrote in the journal he once kept hidden in his nightstand drawer. This isn't love. This is survival. Back then, he wrote it out of fear. Now, he reads it with pride. Because he didn't just survive. He came back stronger.